Welcome to the NCDWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 230 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, we are talking about what to do in the eye of the storm. When you're confronted with a storm, how should you respond? I'm going to give you a game plan. In the world of business, a lot of times we talk about problems as they arise, as fires, any type of major event that we have to deal with that is ugly, that is going to require difficulty to get through. We often describe as going through a fire, but we can also describe it as a storm. And I'm going to have to ask you to forgive the kind of like poor color on video and potentially any poor sound quality. I am settling into the new Crow's Nest Studios from my home in North Topsail Beach. The lighting is not the greatest, and I'm still trying to figure out the artificial lighting. The sound, I am not using my normal microphone. I'm using a lapel microphone, so hopefully there is not like crazy amounts of static that is coming through right now. But despite the bad audio and video that you may be experiencing, one of the cool things about this setup is that you can literally see the Atlantic Ocean in the background right now. And as of the moment of this recording, we are in the midst of a tropical storm. Just received notice of a tornado warning in the area. So this is truly being recorded in the midst of a storm. So appropriate for the details of today's episode. Now, last episode, we talked about responding to the call to adventure, episode 229, and what may happen if you respond to adventure. There's going to be great reward, but you also may be called into the storm. Just as I used the example of Bilbo being called out of the Shire onto his amazing quest, it was not all sunshine and roses. There was trials and storms to be dealt with along the path in the adventure before the moment of glory, before the quest was finished. So literally am recording this in the midst of a storm, and there's nothing better to talk about. Now, the steps for dealing with a storm are extremely important for us. And I think that one reason we don't always respond well to storms within our business as legal professionals is that all we deal with is storms. We are so used to being in the midst of trial. Like literally the culmination of our profession is trial, right? Trial by fire, trial by storm. Like trial is where we live and breathe. Difficult situations, anxiety-provoking situations, uncomfortable situations. The reason that people are hiring us as criminal defense lawyers, as traffic ticket lawyers, is because something has gone horrifically bad in that person's life. And so we are used to living in storm-filled situations. And the problem with being used to living in storm-filled situations is that we don't always respond because we have a difficult time separating the normal anxieties that we experience day to day just simply due to the profession that we're involved in with the kind of real fires that get thrown on us, whether that is kind of an unexpected outcome in the courtroom, whether that is our kind of right arm person leaving our law practice and going to another firm or moving out of state, whatever kind of out of the ordinary fires that we experience in our practice, a lot of times we don't treat these the way they should be treated because we kind of are so much in the fire zone already just due to the profession that we are a part of. So I'm going to give you 3 steps to dealing with a stormy situation. Step number 1, you got to step back. You got to step back, take a deep breath, and assess. Timber Hawkeye, I've got a couple of like kind of randomly quoted quotes in today's episode, people that I had never heard before. So Timber Hawkeye said this: "You can't calm the storm, so stop trying. What you can do is calm yourself. The storm will pass." I love that quote. You can't calm the storm, so stop trying. What you can do is calm yourself. The storm will pass. If you respond incorrectly in a storm, if you don't think your way through things and you take an immediate reaction in a storm, you can make a stormy situation a lot worse. If you're in the midst of a storm and you react poorly, it's going to become a increasingly difficult, potentially even dire situation. So what you can do is calm yourself. So anytime you are in a stormy situation, you should take a step back. I think the easiest way to do this particular step is through actually physically doing these steps. So if you have a stormy situation, taking a step back could be could be not literal. Taking a deep breath could be interpreted as like not a literal taking a deep breath. I actually think it's important to really do these things. So whether you physically take a step back, literally kind of like put yourself backwards, or you go seclude yourself in your office or get out of the office and go to a coffee shop, the first thing you want to do is take a step back from the situation. Immediately responding is going to make things worse almost without question. So if you have a true fire thrown at you, if you have a true emergency situation, a truly dire situation thrown at you in personal life, in professional life, take a step back. Remove yourself from the front lines. Remove yourself from the situation. Then take a deep breath. And again, do this metaphorically, but do it literally. I'm not trying to sound like Darth Vader, okay? So that's freaking you out. Sorry about that. Take a literal deep breath. Take a literal deep breath. Because if you can take a literal deep breath, you'll be in a better position. You'll be able to think more clearly. You will get oxygen to your brain. As your heart rate elevates under dire circumstances, our breathing gets irregular. So we need to get our physical body into a better place of thinking by getting oxygen to the brain, by lowering our heart rate so that we can calmly be in the midst of the storm and make good decisions. So step back, remove yourself from the situation, take a literal step back, go to your office, get out of the office, go to a place where you can think, take some deep breaths, and then assess the situation. Look around. The front lines in battle are not in a good position to see how to adjust. The general, the commander, is typically in an overwatch position so that commander can figure out how the battle plan needs to be adjusted, how to deal with the tactical decisions that are happening on the front lines. You've got to remove yourself from the situation. You have to be able to assess. If you get bad news about a case, there's something ugly that pops up in discovery. There is your Google's algorithm has you fall off the first page of Google or out of the 3 map listings locations. Whatever, again, that storm looks like, you got to get yourself out of the situation, take some deep breaths, and assess, what do we need to do? You've got to get yourself in a place where you can think clearly. If you react quickly and inappropriately in the midst of that storm, you're typically going to make some bad decisions. And I have done this in all areas of professional life. When it comes to marketing, when it comes to hiring, somebody leaves your firm and you're like, I need somebody else in here right now. This is, we cannot move forward without having this position filled, and you fill it immediately and fill it with the wrong person. You now have an additional problem on your hands. You now have an additional storm, an additional fire that you are going to have to deal with. That rain is pounding outside right now. Pretty wild. This is perfect setting for this stormy talk that we are doing right now. Hopefully the power won't go out and you guys lose the rest of this thing. But you have to remove yourself from the situation. You have to be able to assess. So process dealing with the storm. Step number 1, you got to step back, take a deep breath, and assess. Step number 2, you got to prioritize and execute. This is one of Jocko's combat laws, right? Prioritize and execute. You have to recognize that not everything that you can do to solve the problem or take steps towards solving the problem is equally as important. Generally, the difficulty with prioritization is that we feel like we're wasting time. We see a problem, again, as attorneys, as legal professionals, we're like, hey, I know how to fix problems and I know how to do it quickly. But when we're confronted with a fire or a storm that we are not used to dealing with, we can bring that same mentality of, look, I'm about solving problems immediately. I execute, I get things done. That's how I roll. I am good in tough, problematic situations. I can knock this out. That's a bad mentality to have when it comes to executing in the midst of a storm. Not everything is equally as important. Hard work is critical, but you have to put your energy into the right place. You have to put your energy into the right place. So here's what I would do. When you're in that, when you've taken that step back, you've removed yourself from the situation, you've got to that quiet place where you can think, you need to write down what you believe needs to be done in detail about this problem. You need to make a written step list or a written checklist of things that need to get done to deal with this problem. Maybe you want to invite somebody else into this conversation, but you have to get a written list. I think our brains, when we don't know what all of the to-do items are, we just kind of panic and start working on something so we can feel like we're trying to address the situation. If you've not made a to-do list, then you can't prioritize. If you've not written down in detail the steps that are going to be necessary, you cannot prioritize how to deal with the situation. Make that action item list. Prioritize. You've got to be able to figure out what items are going to be most important in dealing with this situation. Again, let's just use it as an example. You've lost your right-hand person. Again, gut reaction might be, I just need to hire somebody else, get them in here. Not going to worry about how I'm going to train them, not worry about how I'm going to select them. I just need somebody in the office to answer phones. So you might write down a list and say, how long is Susie still going to be with me? How far can she get me through? How quickly would she be able to train somebody else that we get in? What does our hiring process look like? Does it need to be adjusted in any way? What items in the meantime can I shift to some third party person, somebody else on the team until we find Susie's replacement? What things can I take on myself for a limited amount of time so that we can correctly hire the right next person? You've got to create a to-do list of items that need to be addressed, as opposed to just panicking and saying, I need to close up my law practice because I'll never find another Susie. I'm just going to do all the work myself because it's not worth trying to find another Susie. I'm going to hire the bum on the street because that person's unemployed and I need somebody to work. You have to have a plan. And in order to have a plan, you got to have a written list. I'm all about writing things down because if it's not in writing, it's not real. You cannot, to me, I don't think most of us can properly prioritize and execute until we write down in detailed fashion what the items are and then go back through that list and say, okay, here's the top priority, or here's the top 3 priorities that are on that list. I need to do these things within the next 2 days or the next 2 weeks, and the other 18 items can wait until we've handled these top 3 priorities. Don't just throw yourself into working. Don't just say, I know how to solve problems by action. You've got to be putting your energy into the right place when there is a bad problem, a bad storm, a serious fire that you are dealing with. So number 2, prioritize and execute. And number 3, you've got to debrief. Once the storm has passed, once the storm is over, once the winds have calmed, once the waves have gotten back to normal, tide is regular again, once all of those, once the storm clouds have passed, you need to debrief. You need to figure out how you can eliminate the storm altogether in the future, or how you can derail future storms with more efficiency, deal with future storms in a better way. So again, another author that I didn't know existed and never quit in the past is Paulo Coelho. He says, a mistake repeated more than once is a decision. I love that quote. A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. The Freedom Fighter Summit coming up in 10 days from the time of this recording. My main workshop is about my 5 greatest mistakes in law practice, which I also am calling my 5 biggest successes. It's going to be an amazing workshop. I'm really pumped about this. But it's all about mistakes. And I love this quote. A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. If you don't take a look at the storm that you came through, I think it's so easy to come through a storm and just kind of wipe your brow with your wrist and say, made it through, survived that. We replaced Susie. Things didn't fall apart. The phones continued to get answered. The bank account didn't go into the red. We survived. If you just have that survivor's mentality and then you're on to the next storm, or you're back into kind of the day-to-day routine, you've missed a golden opportunity to avoid a future fire, to eliminate a future storm. Now, some storms can be totally eliminated, right? Maybe when you replace Susie, you say, you know what, like, we don't need this kind of constant turnover in this position. How can I turn this over to, this particular task to a third-party vendor, and they can deal with the hiring problem? How can, I get an AI agent to take care of this particular issue, right? So it may be that you could eliminate a future similar storm altogether. But if you can't eliminate the future storm, maybe you say, look, we need a better hiring process in place. We need a better way of dealing with this particular issue that is definitely going to arise in the future, so that when that happens, panic doesn't set in again immediately. We can say, here's the game plan for how we're going to put this fire out. Here's the game plan of how we are going to hunker down and shelter in for this particular storm. And we've got a fortress built up around us so that the storm, we won't even feel the effects. We won't even really know that the storm is going on because we planned so well for this. You've got to debrief. And I think generally for a debrief session, you need to include somebody else, whether that's a member from your team, another lawyer in the legal profession, or if you're a legal assistant or paralegal, somebody else that's doing the type of work that you're doing, because you got to have some outside perspective. We're really good as human beings about lying to ourselves and pretending like we got it all figured out. Get somebody else's perspective on the situation so that you can avoid making the same mistake in the future. Don't let a mistake repeat itself, because if you do that, you're making a decision to have that fire burn you, to get swept up in the storm the next time it rears its ugly head. So 3 steps: take a step back, take a deep breath and assess. Number 2, prioritize and execute. Number 3, debrief. We deal with storms as business owners, as business people all the time. We deal with storms as lawyers on a daily basis. We have to become storm masters. I feel like we already are storm chasers. I just saw the new Twister movie that came out. Amazing movie. That was a blast of a movie. If you haven't seen that and you like the old Twister movies, go see that movie, because that movie is awesome and super fun. But we're storm chasers. We literally are seeking out problematic and difficult and hair-raising situations as criminal defense lawyers. So we have to become storm masters. We have to learn how to deal with things in the eye of the storm. One of the things that we're going to be focusing on at the Freedom Fighter Summit 10 days from now is how to become expert storm masters, how to deal with trials, difficulty, and suffering. I'm going to be kicking things off with a talk on this, obviously also doing the mistakes workshop, but don't miss out on the opportunity to become a master of stormy situations at the Freedom Fighter Summit with an amazing group of other lawyers and legal professionals. I'm pumped about this. I have been practicing my speeches. I have been talking with the speakers. I've been talking with the attendees for the last month. This has definitely been the focal point of my life, and I am pumped about this opportunity. So come to the Freedom Fighter Summit, figure out how to take your storm down and get it under control. And I look forward to speaking with you again next time.